Добрий день всім.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Olga Atamanova. Welcome to Ukraine Media Center to Ukrinform. Briefly about our schedule for today. At 3 p.m. we'll have Daria Gerasimchuk, advisor to the President of Ukraine, representative for children's rights and rehabilitation of children, and we'll discuss the forceful deportation of our children to Russian Federation. At 4:30 p.m. We will have people from the Poturaiev organization and NGO. We'll talk with them about rescuing our pets, our friends, during the wartime. And right now, I'd like to introduce Mykyta Poturaiev, People's Deputy, Parliament member, and we'll discuss counteracting Russian propaganda. So, Mr. Poturaiev, please tell us how it goes and how effective we are in that resistance and that fight. Good afternoon. First of all, I'd like to welcome and thank Ukraine Media Center and welcome them on the occasion of beginning of their joint project with Ukrinform in Kyiv. That's nice to see. Second, about the main subject that we are now handling in the Committee for Humanitarian Information Policy, of which I'm the chairman. Of course, now our efforts have been focused on such areas as counteracting Russian propaganda and misinformation, recognition of Russia as a terrorist state, and when we say terrorist, we mean only the general meaning of this word, but also in information terrorist, that state is an information terrorist. We have been working on that recognition. Toward that recognition, also our efforts have been focused on ensuring proper protection of children, rights of Ukrainian children who have been forced to emigrate under temporary protection of EU countries, not only EU countries. Of course, there is a separate topic which you will discuss separately later today, which is the tragic fate of Ukrainian children who have been forcefully brought to the territory of the aggressor state, the occupying state. But better we probably discuss that subject with Daria Gerasimchuk later today. About counteracting Russian propaganda and misinformation. We have issued a joint statement by three committees: Parliamentary Committee for Euro Integration, Parliamentary Committee for International Affairs, and our committee towards parliaments of EU countries and all countries in the civilized world, Ukraine's friends and allies, where we called for them to take strictest measures, strictest steps towards blocking any media presence of Russian media controlled by the state, about sanctions against not only Russian propaganda actors who are like hosts of programs or so-called journalists, but also we call for sanctions against so-called media experts. I mean, not those who are experts on media, but those who have been implementing Kremlin's assignments by taking part in various programs, including news programs and so on. We hope that this is the first step, and we will get similar statements at the parliament's level from parliaments of friendly countries. And then we are going to develop the respective resolution of the Verkhovna Rada, and we'll ask parliaments of friendly countries, our allies, to also make similar resolutions so that there would be some, say, legislative framework to act in a systemic way to push Russia, I mean those media controlled by the Russian state, Russian government. And we actually know that there is no media in Russia at the so-called federal level, no media which have not been controlled by the state. There is no independent media there. Everything which is everything independent has been in immigration from Russia. So media controlled by the Russian state, the Russian government, cannot be present, should not be present in the media space of free countries where truth is there and where countries defend that truth. And of course, it's about sanctions, both personal sanctions, and we also insist on having within the next sets of sanctions attention paid to depriving Russia of access to those technologies and those items which are the basis for modern media, TV and online media and radio and so on. That's about Russian propaganda as such, and of course misinformation is also there. Now, speaking about another sensitive area, sensitive for society, which is what's happening in the religious area. It's about the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, which we call Moscow Poturaiev Church for many years. I purposely made this misspelling because I have to be very correct as a politician in legal terms, but you know what we mean. Yesterday, as you know, there was a meeting of the Synod of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, and I understand that there are various attitudes toward that decision in the society, but to say it in a politically correct way, we have been surprised with that decision of the Synod. And not only in our committee, but also today we have already seen a statement issued by the State Agency for State Service for Religion and Religious Affairs. You're welcome to read that statement. And we decided, even before that information about the outcome of yesterday's Synod session was published, we decided to run a hearing of in our committee about the role of churches. What's going on with churches? First of all, it's about that church whose leadership is in the territory of the aggressor state and has been controlled by the aggressor state. And here I am talking in an absolutely correct way, because that's taken. That wording is taken from the law of 2018, so it's very clear. So now we have tentatively planned those hearings for the end of May. And I hope that based on the results of those hearings, there will be clear recommendations issued for the executive authorities as well as law enforcement. And probably there will also be certain decisions based on the results of those hearings. There will be some decisions at the legislative level. But this is a serious issue. We definitely don't want to give the enemy any reasons to accuse us of any sort of persecution of any groups that they imagine. So we will clearly stand for Ukraine's interests, for the interests of national security and defense, but we'll be doing it in such a way that the enemy would not have any reasons. Prohibition of Russian media, how effective it has been. Definitely prohibition of Russian media has been effective, and we have made a statement which has already been handled. Of course, at the national level, first of all, due to the strict position of the president, even before the beginning of this war, pro-Russian media they lost their ability to use and to work in Ukrainian media space. But in occupied territories, luckily very rarely, but still there are cases, but luckily very rare cases, when under the brand of Ukrainian media, so to say, they find some collaborationists and try to broadcast, even though there are also completely different cases. For example, in Kherson, radio employees of Kherson Radio, when Kherson was already occupied, they were risking their freedom, their lives, their health, but for several weeks they continued broadcasting, and the occupiers were unable to find those transmitters because they are stupid, you know. They didn't know that in Ukraine radio transmitters are not only on those big poles, but also on the big towers, but also and on the roofs of residential buildings and so on. So the radio broadcasters, Kherson radio employees, were broadcasting for several weeks until some traitor provided information to the occupiers where to look for those towers, for those transmitters, for those locations which were used by Kherson Radio for broadcasting, and so then it unfortunately stopped, the broadcasting stopped. So there are many cases of very brave and even heroic behavior and professional work of Ukrainian media employees who have been under temporary occupation. But unfortunately, there are cases, very few cases, but still there are some cases of collaboration with the enemy. Again, I'd like to emphasize it's not about collaboration by the medium as such. Some radio, some TV channel and so on. They just steal some equipment, they steal the brand, some people steal the brand, enemy steals the brand, they find some collaborationists who can handle that equipment somehow, and in that way they are masking their occupant broadcasting under the guise of Ukrainian broadcasters which existed before this war, before this occupation. These are very mean practices, but we have nothing to be surprised with. We have seen during this war the whole range of moral and ethical death and those who are on the Russian flags. Speaking about Russian language, Russian media, Russian culture, what should be prohibited, what should not, what should we fight and what should we not, and so on, how to distinguish between these things. I'd like to say that this is to be some serious work. Of course, we need to review a lot of things which seemed very trivial to us, things which always existed. I think that now we as a society clearly understand that it should not be the way it used to be. We have to review school programs, educational programs. That's of course for my colleagues from the Education and Science Committee, but we are also discussing it. We have to review our university curricula. We have to review, and it's already being done at the local authorities level. We should review geographic names, various monuments, what is the value of those monuments, why do we have those monuments in Ukrainian cities. Because, of course, generally we understand that, unfortunately, even though we have we got rid of many symbols of political control by the empire, be it Tsarist empire or Bolshevik empire. But unfortunately, we haven't got rid of many symbols of cultural control of the empire over Ukraine. This is the process which has already started, and the state government has just to help it in such direction that things that we believe are needed would remain. And where there are things which we clearly believe they have nothing to do with us, then why should we have those things in Ukraine? And of course, if we say that certain writers, Russian writers who were writing in Russian, they have to be in our libraries in quality translation into Ukrainian, but when emphasizing these things, we have to understand that we'll have to work a lot to replace. By the way, in our libraries we had a lot of books, not just in Russian language, but Soviet books. And now Alexander Tkachenko, the Minister for Culture and Information Policy, as well as me and my colleagues, we run discussions with our Western allies, our partners, and we keep saying that in our very difficult financial situation, we have some targeted programs to be able to replace those books with new books in Ukrainian language, including new titles. We should be able to provide funding for our cultural programs. We have tools for that. We have Ukrainian Cultural Fund. We have our Institute for Book Institute. They have proven to be transparent and effective. So we have something to offer to our partners, our European and international partners, so that those would be able to support Ukrainian culture in a targeted way. I'd like to emphasize that our policy now is, and I am sure it will remain like this, unlike Russia, unlike Russian policies, when we know that the first thing they do when they come to our temporarily occupied villages and towns, after they stop killing and stealing and raping, the first thing they would do after that would be they would come to libraries and they would remove all books in Ukrainian language from there. They would put them to fire. There has been a lot of evidence, a lot of witnesses who witnessed those things. Look, compared with atrocities and crimes by Russians, maybe these news are not that visible in the information space, but still we have dozens of testimonies that they consciously destroy all that literature in the Ukrainian language. So when they come there and while they're there, they destroy everything: textbooks, books for children, the letter, scientific literature, any literature. As soon as they see Ukrainian language, Ukrainian letter, they put it to fire, into fire. They're like clearly like Nazis. This is no news to us. They behave like Nazis did behave. We see the same story about monuments. We see that as soon as those occupiers enter our towns and villages, they immediately restore Russian monuments, and maybe you will tell us why it happens, because I understand that often our young people don't even understand who are those people whom they see again in those monuments. Well, here we get back to that part of our discussions where we already mentioned that we should get rid of those signs, of those symbols of empire's cultural rule here. And this is a marker, as I recently said, my city of Dnipro, indeed, Alexander Pushkin was there. He would swim in Dnipro River there. He would get cold, and he was treated for 2 weeks by prostitutes in local brothel, and he stayed there, and he said very nice things about that brothel. But that's his whole relation with the city of Dnipro. Although it said that he was writing this Poltava poem while he was staying there, but this is apocryphal, I think. But at least some connection to Dnipro. But what did Pushkin do in Lviv, in Dnipro? What did Tolstoy do there? Is there any relation? No, these are just markers of cultural rules, empire's cultural rule over Ukraine and Ukrainians. So when Russians come, they set that marker there. First of all, they put Lenin there. I don't know where they get it. Maybe they bring Lenin statues from Russia, because we got rid from those statues. They bring our washing machines into Russia, and they bring Lenin statues from Russia. So these are just markers, like they write somewhere on the wall of some architectural monument, Vasya was there, or Ivan was there, and then they add some swear word there. Like fuck, but that's like it happens. That's the process. That's like in Bucha. By the way, this is completely Bolshevik way of behavior, which was described in many memoirs during the Bolsheviks revolution. It's the same, like, things that were happening back then in 1917. If you compare it with what happened in our cities and towns now, when they live everywhere, their feces everywhere on tables and cabinets and so on. Guys from our special operation forces who were there told me that they saw that Russians would shit there and then take that shit and dry it on the wall with hand. That's for you, Ukrainians, root word for Ukrainians. It's the same like Lenin's monument, So Lenin's monument is the same way. It's like that heap of shit. And in that way, they try to mark our territory, to label our territory. Either they put a heap of shit there, or they put Lenin's monument there. That's the same. Mykyta, how to ensure the government's effectiveness in information war without any censorship at the same way? Well, I believe that at the moment, even though there may have been some mistakes, because we had to make some decisions very quickly, and we had to ensure the unity and information, integrity in information space. I believe that, irrespective of any mistakes, still we have done it very well. We definitely have some integrity, some unity in terms of contents, in terms of information in our media space, and we clearly see it. I personally have also been monitoring developments in the international information space, and we clearly have this one-voice policy. We don't have any political arguments. We all stand for Ukraine positions, whichever party we represent. In all trips, at all meetings, everybody says things which are of fundamental importance for our country, for our national defense. So I believe that this unity, this reliability, we don't lie. If you cannot confirm something, we say it honestly that we cannot confirm it. So during all those days, dramatic days since the beginning of the war, nobody has been able to say that Ukrainians have said something which was an amplification, overstatement. Another way, our European colleagues told me that's an understatement. I said that was an understatement because we never lie. When we had some first testimonies about the atrocities in Bucha, when they were still unconfirmed, I said we have been getting those first reports. They have not been confirmed as yet, but we are receiving them. When the occupiers left, we realized the whole scale of their crime. So the authenticity, the reliability of our information is our important weapon, and I am sure that we will continue the same way. There is no reason to believe there's no reason for any doubt. We will be all together, politicians, public leaders, journalists, whoever, will keep to those principles. Of course, we have to remember that unfortunately, this position we have in the global information space, our domination is unfortunately based on those atrocities and mass-scale crimes by Russians, genocide and war crimes, of which you are well aware. I could also cover a bit great damage, often unfortunately irreparable damage, which war has made to Ukrainian cultural facilities, and there is a whole range of those architectural monuments, historical monuments, religious buildings, including ancient ones, very old ones. It's about cultural facilities like public centers, cultural centers, former clubs, libraries, which existed either as separate facilities or within those public cultural centers. Unfortunately, you're aware of the tragedy of Maria Primachenko's museum, of Grigory Skovoroda's museum. You know, there is no doubt anymore that a small but very valuable collection of skith golden things was stolen from Melitopol, things were stolen from Mariupol, paintings were stolen, not just from Mariupol, even though those were from empire time, but Ivazovsky and Quinchit, those artists were working in Ukraine. That's our heritage. And Russians also steal that heritage. They destroy those museum items, by the way, in Skovroda Museum. We understand that they purposely hit it with a rocket. It was not just by chance. They consciously hit that building with that rocket, with that missile. It was no mistake. It's not a big city where a missile would probably try to target some factory, but that high-precision missile would hit a residential building and kill people. No, but this time it was absolutely conscious. They wanted to destroy that museum of a great Ukrainian philosopher of global importance, global significance. We are not surprised with anything nowadays, usually, but we have to remember that without Grigory Skovroda, there would be no Orthodox philosophy as such, Orthodox Christian philosophy, also in the Russian Empire. Father Sergei Bulgakov would not appear without Skovroda, Nikolai Budyaev would not appear without Skovroda, many Orthodox Christian philosophers would not appear without Grigory Skovroda, their predecessor. But we should not be surprised with such things, because, people who come and say that they want to defend Orthodox Christianity and then destroy a 17th century church in Kharkiv, they destroy churches in Chernihiv, they damage churches which survived Bati, Mongolian Khan. Guys, colleagues, you are welcome to ask your questions. Ukrinform, thank you. We have 3 questions. I am Vitaly Golod from Ukrinform. Could you please tell us which legislative mechanisms we could use to so that in the future Russian propaganda would not appear in Ukrainian media space. Second question: in a recent interview for Ukrinform, you said that the humanitarian committee should develop a draft law to regulate activities of the national TV marathon. So what's the situation with that work? And third, recently Ukrainian journalists got a Pulitzer Prize. Do you think it was worth doing it? Because, we are all different. Ukrainian journalists are all different, and maybe some of them are not exactly pro-Ukrainian among us. First of all, let me start with congratulating Ukrainian journalists. That Pulitzer Prize, this has been the first time ever in the history of Ukraine. I hope this is not the last time. I hope that also there will be more Pulitzer Prizes for journalists and journalist teams, and I hope that the reason will not be war in the future. Whatever you think about it, I think this is some symbol, some decoration showing that the Ukrainian journalists, most of them are very brave. Their total majority of Ukrainian journalists have been very brave in their professional activities. Unfortunately, there have been losses among Ukrainian journalists, combat losses. Now, I will not promise anything in advance, but we are discussing possible amendments to legislation whereby not only the military or people from state emergency service, people who are on the front line risking their lives and unfortunately die there sometimes, but also people who died when performing their professional duties at the front line, including, of course, journalists, including people of other professions, doctors and others, so that those people would always also get, and their families would also get some social protection, social security. We have to have respect for everybody who performs their professional duty till the very last minute of their life. So I believe that in any case, Pulitzer Prize is an award for all journalists, because Again, in my view, all of them, almost all of them, have been demonstrating to the whole world how journalists should work, what journalists should be. And could you please remind me your other two questions? About humanitarian committee and the draft law on telethon. Well, that telethon, the TV marathon, there has been a situation that committee already heard, which is about 3 channels being cut off T2 transmitters. We listened to everybody involved, to stakeholders, including media themselves, state special communications agency, radio and television concern, National Council for TV and Radio, Ministry of Culture and Information Policies. I'm not sure that it should be regulated in a legislative way, at not a legislative level, but we'll definitely continue discussing these things, and I hope, and today, by the way, I already sent respective calls, respective messages. I hope that there will be another discussion now, not at a committee meeting, but in accordance with the presidential decree number 152, which implemented the National Security Council decision on creation of United News Telethon. We have to analyze how effective is implementation of that presidential decree number 152, and how Ukrainian media contribute, how they are participating in that telethon, so as to ensure the most effective implementation of that presidential decree number 152, so that everybody who wants to work should get this opportunity. And we should strengthen our united information policies rather than weakening it. And I think you also had another question about any mechanisms, preventive mechanisms for the future to prevent, you know, we passed a law on the prohibition of Nazi symbols, and it's a broader law. Now the president submitted his proposals to further improve this law. While I was waiting for the beginning of this briefing, we received proposals from the presidential office, great proposals which further expand the coverage of that law for it to cover certain areas of life and professional activities in Ukraine. So it will become even better. I hope that in the next plenary meeting we'll consider those proposals, and definitely at the early next week we'll run a committee session, and we maintain correspondence with colleagues. There are no objections. The other way around, everybody welcomes those initiatives by the President of Ukraine, which I would like to emphasize will make that law even more effective. And then definitely when we have more opportunities, when we have more time, we'll have to work on that legislation. Maybe we'll get back to the law on media. I think that now there will be not so many people who would argue against the need for such law in Ukraine. So either within the framework of that law on media, or there will be some separate part about Russian propaganda and counteracting that propaganda, but that part should be deepened a lot, should be expanded a lot, should become much stricter. Because when we were developing, you know, people were saying, oh, it's too strict, but now we understand how important it is to set even stronger barriers against Russian propaganda. Thank you. Thank you. Any more questions, dear friends? I'm Viktor Melnikov from CGTN. Could you please name specific names of Russian agents who exercise Russian influence, whom you're going to somehow restrict? Well, speaking about Russian agents, Well, I don't see them in Ukraine because I am not head of the security service, you know. We learn about those facts of collaboration with the enemy, open or hidden collaboration with the enemy from security service information. And the media, well, in media sphere too, we don't have pro-Russian media now in Ukraine, you know. They have all been under sanctions. But speaking about Russian media, clearly there is a list of people whom we suggest to impose sanctions. Everybody is aware of Solovyev, Kiselev, Skabeyeva, Popov, and all those bastards. I would not like to name them, all these people, like Simonyan and others. But by the way, I didn't tell you that one of the initiatives, maybe that could be of interest to you, one of the initiatives was very recently issued by our committee, and we propose that the National Security and Defense Council should impose sanctions on the leaders of Russian Orthodox Church, starting clearly from Comrade Gundyaev, because I know that he is a security service officer, and seven other leaders of the Russian Orthodox Church. Because, you know, definitely we should not be lagging behind our allies in those matters. By the way, that's about your question. When we say that, you know, please impose sanctions against leaders of the Russian Orthodox Church, against Russian propagandists, we should not be lagging behind. We should also be making our lists, and so we should have those sanctions, and then we should apply it to our Western partners for them to impose sanctions. Interpreter cannot hear the question. The interpreter cannot hear the question. With YouTube, the situation is difficult. This subject is handled by the Ministry of Culture and Information Policy, as effective as it can be handled now. By the way, Alphabet Corporation, of which YouTube is a part, have started responding much faster to requests by Ukraine. This problem remains significant. We know that it may become even stronger if the purchase of Twitter by Mr. Musk is finalized, because, as you know from public statements of Mr. Musk is completely against any restrictions, any limitations. So, as we know, if that acquisition is finalized and Twitter becomes controlled by Mr. Musk, then there is a danger that all those bans will be removed, will be lifted, also bans from Russian propagandists, or those who just use Russian money, are paid with Russian money to undermine stability in democratic countries, including Ukraine, of course, but not only in Ukraine. So there are such threats, but still I hope that the example of Mr. Shari, who I'm sure will be extradited to Ukraine, and he will be properly punished by Ukrainian court. I hope that this example will make Russian propagandists understand something, at least to some extent, or influence agents of Russia. Last question.
Mykyta Русланович, в мене таке питання.
I have such a question. There have been various discussions about whether it's worth to fully cancel Russia in cultural space, or maybe there are still some good Russians which are acceptable, which can be accepted for collaboration in some of our cultural projects, international projects. In your view, how it's regulated in legislative area, whether state entities can support participation of some Russian citizens who have some pro-Ukrainian position, pro-Ukrainian standing in the projects supported by the government in some way or another. And what's your personal view whether it's acceptable to have such identity as a person of Russian culture now in Ukrainian space. I will start answering by saying that I think that, a person of any particular culture is actually not very good as a description, as a definition, because we see what's happening in Ukraine, in those places where people of a certain culture come. I think that we should all learn some lessons from that, and Ukrainians should be people of culture. Of course, the fundament of that should be Ukrainian culture, but each and every Ukrainian should be a person of culture, for global culture, world culture. Because the world culture is humanistic in its nature. Modern world culture is humanistic. So we are fighting for life, we are not fighting for death, we are fighting for life, and our people are sacrificing their lives for life to continue in Ukraine and worldwide. About so-called good Russians. By the way, now we have been working on a law, not just on national music product, but a lot of attention is paid to that. There is more or less the same situation. We had a situation, we are not to assess it now, but we had quite a lot of Russian music, Russian musical product on Ukrainian radio channels before the start of this war. Now, of course, everybody has dropped it, but we have to regulate it. The same like with books. Even where we have libraries in government-controlled areas where there has been no occupation. There is still a lot of Soviet books, a lot of Russian books. Of course, there are differences between different regions, but still they are there. We have to remove them, but we have to replace them with our Ukrainian product. I mean, produced in Ukrainian language, and authors could be different, various authors. But the same. The same applies to the radio. We should replace it with world music, with world hits. About Russian music, yeah, we have been having a productive discussion. We currently believe that yes, we can welcome. There are cases, there are examples when certain Russian actors, artists left Ukraine, they have concerts and they transfer money there on those concerts to support Ukraine. They're afraid of transferring money for the Ukrainian army, but at least for Ukrainian ADPs, they are doing it. We have such cases. But how many people like that we have? We tried to count, to calculate, and I could count them with fingers on one hand. Under a discussion, maybe we should add another hand. There are very few of such people. About those people who stay in Russia, we have very strict attitude, very strict position. We do value those people who remain in Russia and still have courage to make statements in support of Ukraine. But, excuse me, those statements don't compensate for the fact that if one continues to work in Russia, he or she continues paying taxes in Russia. Taxes which are used to make ordnance, to make rockets, bombs, projectiles, which are used to kill Ukrainians. That's how we distinguish. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to remind you that we had People's Deputy of Ukraine, Mykyta Poturaiev, with us. Dear friends, thank you for being with us. At 3 p.m. we'll have Darya Gerasimchuk, and we'll discuss with her forced deportation of our children to Russian Federation. Please stay with us.